here he is, Clint Walker.
But Jack was, when you got to know him, he was a sweetheart.
They were Hollywood brothers. On screen, Clint Walker and Jack Elam fought side by side, bringing the Wild West to life. Off-screen, they shared laughter, poker nights, and years of friendship. But when Jack Elam passed away in 2003, fans noticed something shocking. Clint Walker, his longtime co-star and friend, was missing from the funeral. Rumors immediately spread. Some whispered about a falling out. Others believed there had been a hidden rift. But the truth, when it came out, was far more complicated and far more heartbreaking. Jack Elam may have built a career on unforgettable characters, but his real story began in hardship few could imagine. Born in 1920 in the small mining town of Miami, Arizona, Jack grew up in a place where luxuries were rare and survival was the only goal. His childhood was marked by tragedy, almost from the start. At just 4 years old, he lost his mother after a long illness, leaving him and his sister to bounce between relatives. Those early years were filled with instability, and friends later said it left Jack with a toughness that never left him. But fate was not done testing him. At the age of 11, during what should have been an ordinary Boy Scouts meeting, a scuffle broke out. In the chaos, a pencil was shoved into Jack's left eye. The damage was permanent. From that moment forward, his eye drifted off-center, giving him the misaligned gaze that became his trademark. Some might have seen it as a curse, but others believe it was the very feature that made him unforgettable on screen. Rumors even suggest Jack would later joke about it constantly, turning a painful childhood accident into part of his charm. During those years, there was no sign he would ever be an actor. He worked odd jobs, picked cotton, and helped support his family during the Great Depression. The boy who endured tragedy and disfigurement was by all accounts expected to live a quiet life, yet the very hardships that seemed to hold him back were unknowingly shaping the man who would one day steal the spotlight in Hollywood. Before Jack Elam ever terrified audiences as a cold-eyed outlaw, he was a man who lived by numbers, not by scripts. After high school, Elam did not chase Hollywood dreams. He enrolled in a business program and carved out a career as an accountant. By the early 1940s, he was already holding positions that seemed worlds away from the silver screen. He worked for Standard Oil, managed Los Angeles's prestigious Bel Air Hotel, and later became an independent auditor with major clients like Samuel Goldwyn Productions and Hopalong Cassidy Productions. By all accounts, Jack had settled into a stable, respectable life, one built on ledgers, long hours, and quiet routines. But stability came at a steep price. The endless paperwork strained his good eye so badly that doctors warned he could lose his vision completely if he did not make a change. This terrifying possibility forced Elam to rethink everything. It was either continue down the safe path of numbers or risk everything on a future that offered no guarantees. Some reports claim that fate intervened when a friend, a struggling filmmaker, asked Jack to help finance 3 low-budget westerns. Elam, who had always been shrewd with money, agreed, but with one unusual condition. He demanded small acting parts in each film as part of the deal. That gamble proved life-changing. His first appearance in The Sundowners in 1950 introduced audiences to a rugged man whose wandering eye and sharp features made him look like someone born to play villains. He did not just fit into the role, he owned it. In fact, one of his early performances was so shocking that it left audiences stunned. Playing a merciless outlaw, Elam's character shot a baby in cold blood on screen, a scene that critics said burned itself into the memory of anyone who saw it. Hollywood suddenly realized this former accountant had something rare, a look and presence that audiences could not forget. What could have been Jack's greatest insecurity became the key to his career. By the mid-1950s, he was in constant demand for westerns and crime dramas, cast as killers, thieves, and cold-blooded outlaws. Jack Elam may have built his name as one of Hollywood's most feared villains, but his career did not stop there. One of the most surprising twists of his life was how he transformed from a chilling outlaw to a comedic scene stealer who could make audiences laugh just as easily as he once made them shiver. By the late 1960s, Elam had already appeared in dozens of westerns, his reputation sealed as the man with the dangerous glare. But then came a role that nobody expected. In 1969's Support Your Local Sheriff, Elam was cast not as the ruthless killer, but as Jake, a bumbling sidekick with a talent for turning tense moments into comedy gold. Audiences who had grown used to fearing him suddenly saw a different side. A man whose crooked eye and deadpan delivery could be just as effective for laughs as they were for menace. The film became a surprise hit, and with it, Elam discovered a new lane in Hollywood. Director Burt Kennedy is often credited with seeing Elam's hidden comedic talent. Kennedy reportedly told others that Jack had impeccable timing, the kind that could not be taught. Once Support Your Local Sheriff proved successful, a sequel followed, Support Your Local Gunfighter. Elam himself admitted it was one of his favorite roles, showing that he relished the chance to break away from being typecast. From then on, his career was not confined to villains. He became a regular in comedies, often cast as the lovable misfit, whose quirks added heart and humor to the story. Films like Rio Lobo, The Texas Wheelers, and The Life and Times of Grizzly Adams showcased this side of him. Even mainstream hits like The Cannonball Run brought him to younger audiences who had never seen his westerns. Suddenly, Elam was not just a character actor, he was a household name. By the early 1980s, he was enjoying a second wave of fame, appearing in family-friendly projects and broad comedies that kept him relevant long after the golden age of westerns had faded. While Jack Elam was carving out his reputation as one of Hollywood's most unforgettable villains, another name was rising on the western frontier, Clint Walker. Towering at 6 feet 6 inches, with a calm demeanor and chiseled good looks, Walker was unlike anyone else in the genre. His breakthrough came in 1955 with the Warner Bros. Television series Cheyenne, where he played the drifter Cheyenne Bodie. The show was groundbreaking. It was the first hour-long TV western with a recurring character, and Walker's stoic yet compassionate hero instantly struck a chord with audiences. Viewers saw him as the perfect cowboy, tough when he had to be, gentle when it mattered most. Almost overnight, Walker became one of television's biggest stars. It was during this era that Jack Elam and Clint Walker's paths first crossed. Elam was cast in Cheyenne during the later seasons, appearing as colorful supporting characters that added grit and humor to Walker's straight-laced lead. The contrast between them was undeniable. Walker was the tall, steady hero, while Elam brought unpredictability and a mischievous spark. Together, they created a dynamic that fans loved, and Warner Bros. Quickly realized the chemistry was too good to ignore. It was not long before they were paired again, most memorably in the 1966 feature film Night of the Grizzly. In that movie, Walker played Jim Cole, a former lawman trying to protect his family from both a ruthless land baron and a monstrous bear. Elam, cast as Hank, brought comic relief and heart to balance the tension. The pairing worked brilliantly. Walker's towering presence and Elam's quirky humor played off each other, turning what could have been a routine western into something fans still remember fondly. When the cameras rolled, none of the Hollywood politics mattered. The pairing of Clint Walker and Jack Elam gave western fans some of the genre's most enjoyable moments. Whether trading jokes, facing down villains, or standing shoulder to shoulder in the fight, they represented two sides of the western spirit, one steady and heroic, the other quirky and unpredictable. On screen, Clint Walker and Jack Elam looked like complete opposites. Walker was the towering cowboy hero, quiet and steady, while Elam was the unpredictable sidekick, whose off-center eye and mischievous grin could change the mood of a scene instantly. But behind the scenes, their bond was surprisingly close. Cast and crew often recalled that whenever Walker and Elam worked together, the set felt lighter. Walker's calm presence balanced Elam's endless energy, and the two shared an easy camaraderie that made long days on location far more enjoyable. One of the biggest connections between them came from Elam's love of poker. More than a hobby, it was practically a lifestyle. Friends said he was so devoted to the game that he even negotiated time for poker into his Warner Bros. Contract. Around smoky tables and late-night games, Elam became legendary for his skill and his luck. Some co-stars admitted they would not even bother bringing much money to the table, knowing Jack would usually walk away with the winnings. Clint Walker, who often joined these games, later chuckled about how his friend seemed to have an uncanny way of predicting outcomes, whether it was poker or something as silly as betting on how far a fly would crawl before taking off. But Elam was not just about poker. He was a notorious prankster. Crew members remembered him faking sneezes just to flick water at unsuspecting assistants, or pulling small tricks on extras to break the tension. His sense of humor kept everyone laughing, and Walker was often the first to smile at his antics. For Clint Walker, those qualities seemed to strengthen rather than strain their friendship. He often spoke of Elam's humor with warmth, recalling how his friend's pranks made the toughest shoots more bearable. In an industry known for fragile egos and simmering rivalries, their bond stood out. Walker respected Elam not just as an actor but as a person who never pretended to be anything other than himself. While Jack Elam was navigating the highs and lows of Hollywood, Clint Walker was living a story that could have been ripped straight from a movie script. In 1971, long after he had become a household name thanks to Cheyenne and his string of Western films, Walker took a vacation to Mammoth Mountain in California. What began as a simple day of skiing nearly ended in tragedy. During a run, Walker lost control, and in the chaos, a ski pole pierced his chest, puncturing his heart. By the time rescuers reached him, he was unresponsive. Medical staff later admitted that he was, for all practical purposes, dead. But against all odds, Clint Walker came back. Surgeons worked tirelessly, repairing the damage and reviving his heart. The story of his survival became almost legendary, with some fans calling it a miracle. Newspapers at the time described how Walker's towering frame and extraordinary fitness might have given him just enough strength to endure the trauma. Yet survival came with a price. Reports claim that even though he returned to acting within months, the injury left permanent damage. His heart was never the same, and Walker was forced to live with strict medical advice for the rest of his life. Friends later said that he was more cautious after the accident, knowing that stress or overexertion could trigger complications. Having been so close to death, he became more reflective, quieter, and more private about his personal struggles. While fans continued to see the same heroic cowboy on screen, those who knew him best understood he was living with fragile health that required constant attention. The near-death experience also added a new layer to Walker's mystique. Some believed it was the reason he became more selective with his roles, focusing on projects that mattered to him instead of chasing every opportunity. One fact was undeniable. Clint Walker had been given a second chance at life, but it came with limits that no amount of strength or willpower could erase. By the 1990s, Jack Elam had become more than just a familiar face in westerns. He was a living piece of Hollywood history. His career spanned over 5 decades, with more than 100 films and nearly 300 television appearances. In 1994, his contributions were officially recognized when he was inducted into the Hall of Great Western Performers at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. But away from the spotlight, Elam's health was beginning to decline. He had lived a long, colorful life filled with humor, work, and family, but advancing age and illness slowly took their toll. Those who knew him say that even as his body weakened, his sense of humor never left him. In 2003, after years of battling congestive heart failure, Jack Elam passed away at the age of 82. News of his death rippled through Hollywood, especially among fans of classic westerns. For generations who had grown up watching him on both the big and small screens, his passing felt like the end of an era. Co-stars remembered him as one of the most genuine people they had worked with, a man who never let success change him. As plans for his funeral were made, many fans assumed that one person would be there without question: Clint Walker. After all, Walker and Elam had shared not just screen time, but a friendship built over years of laughter, poker games, and Western adventures. But when the day came, Clint Walker was nowhere to be seen. His absence did not go unnoticed. Fans speculated. Had there been a falling out between the two men? Had something soured their friendship in later years? Some fans whispered about a falling out late in life, suggesting that perhaps Walker and Elam's friendship was not as strong as it had once appeared. But the truth was far more tragic and far more human. Clint Walker had lived with the scars of his near-fatal ski accident for more than 3 decades. Though he survived what doctors called a miracle, the damage to his heart never fully healed. Every doctor who treated him afterward warned that he had to live with constant caution. Stress, travel, and emotional strain were not just uncomfortable, they could be deadly. By 2003, Walker was still working occasionally and meeting fans at conventions, but those appearances were carefully managed. Long trips, like attending Elam's funeral, posed serious risks. Some who knew Walker later said that the decision not to attend was agonizing. He had nothing but fond words for Elam, calling him one of the most memorable men he ever worked with. Yet Walker's health forced him to make a choice: risk his own fragile life for the chance to say goodbye in person, or honor his friend from afar. Reports claim he chose the latter. understanding that one emotional trip could have cost him everything. In interviews years later, Walker addressed the pain of that decision. He admitted that it hurt him deeply not to be there, describing Elam not just as a co-star, but as a true friend who had brightened every set they worked on together. He often shared stories about Elam's humor, like the time Jack tricked a young stand-in by faking a sneeze and flicking water her way. To Walker, those memories were his tribute. He did not need a funeral to honor Jack. He carried his friend with him every day through the laughter and moments they had shared. For fans who once believed the two men had drifted apart, the truth revealed a deeper bond, one tested by circumstance, but never broken by choice. Clint Walker may not have been able to attend Jack Elam's funeral, but that did not mean his friend was forgotten. In the years that followed, whenever Walker spoke about his long career, Elam's name always came up. He described him not just as a co-star, but as someone who could light up even the hardest days on set. Together, the two men represented different sides of the Western myth. Walker was the noble hero, steady and dependable, while Elam was the wild card, the outlaw with a heart, the comic relief who reminded audiences that not everything in the frontier was black and white. Their friendship did not end at a funeral. It lived on in the stories they told and in the way they remembered each other.